Welcome back, friends. This is episode 194 of the Nope Coach podcast. I'm your host, Suzanne Kohlberg, joined once again by Rob Bell. The question lurking in the midst of it. So in our previous episode, Rob dropped a real pearl right at the end. And I was like, hang on, pause. It needs to be its own show. When, it was such a great example, somebody say you went to school or university, college, whatever you call it, where you are in the world, like friends, go through an experience and then meet up however long later, 5-10 years. And there's that one friend who's rehashing the same old story. And then there's the other one who seems to have just kind of left that behind and moved on. And I think what's coming to mind is so many times in my life where it's like, are we having this conversation again? And, am I available to it? Because sometimes I used to get really riled up, like, oh, here we are again. But I was the one who was entertaining it, was saying yes to it, was not interrupting and saying, can we talk about something else? Or even bringing attention to it. You just kind of smile and nod in those situations because, I don't know, it's the polite thing to do.
Yeah, well, you think about, obviously kids grow up with the same set of parents in the same house, and the one is just thirsty for a bigger world and the other one's just fine with a very small. And even there's no judgment. It's just fascinating how human beings, or even think grief, like for some, the loss of someone they love, it opens them up to the universal experience of grief. It like stretches the heart out. It connects them. And others become small and bitter. And look what was taken from me. So this question lurking in the heart of these experiences we have is always like bitter or better. Like how will we be shaped? Did this happen to me or for me?
Yeah.
And so it's interesting when you ask people about like the most significant moments in life, the moments that shaped them, that woke them up in some way. Generally, people tell stories about loss, suffering, disruption, moments when they, for whatever reason or other, were almost like forced into self-inquiry, forced into actually noticing all of the suffering they brought on themselves just by simply the way they were thinking and framing things and the stories they were telling. So it's very strange. The very events that we wouldn't wish on anyone, that we would do anything to avoid, are often the events that later we're like, can't imagine who I'd be if I hadn't been through that. It's all very strange how it actually works.
Frame of bitter or better. So I let Rob know before we hit record, and the listeners who've listened to this show will not know that my mum passed away very recently, and I have siblings, and there is, especially today in the social media world, it's not like it used to be when somebody passes away. How, when, where do you announce it? How, when, what are you available for in terms of people reaching out? And for me personally, I don't enjoy condolences, like as in people go, my condolences, or they just say the thing or they start crying and then I start crying. And I was just like, this is not how I want to play this. And I remember saying to my sister, I was like, no, I'm not going to do, the traditional announcement on my things. So instead what I did was I wrote a whole bunch of fun memories, like things that I enjoyed from my mum. And I invited people who knew her to share theirs as well. Or if they didn't know her, just a fun memory from a loved one or a story or a dad joke. Like, I didn't mind, but this is the way that I wanted to go with it. And my sister was like, well, people are never going to go for that. They're just going to tell you this stuff. I'm like, but people can't know what your boundaries are or what is okay for you if you don't tell them. So it was very interesting to look at we both did our own thing, as you said, about how to announce it. And hers has got hundreds of comments of like, sending you love and all this sort of stuff. There's nothing wrong with that, but mine has all these stories, and she's reading it and she's like, this is what mum would have wanted, and this feels good, like celebrating a life well lived, rather than sitting in what we've lost.
There you go. There you go. And it's interesting how when people start telling all these stories, your mother becomes present to you in some senses new ways.
Especially stories I hadn't heard
Mm-hmm.
or I'd
Yeah.
forgotten.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or someone
Yeah,
else's take on the experience. Like some of my friends were like, your mum was the one who spoke to me when I put my child in school or in daycare, and I felt so guilty. I was like, I never knew that.
Yeah.
And she
Yeah, yeah.
probably, to her, something that's just a conversation or a regular, that is the touchstone that somebody holds on to. And I think, you know, to be reminded of that, or to know that, or to give life to that is powerful.
Yeah, and she counterintuitively becomes closer than ever in some strange way.
Yes.
Present in your heart. When my dad died earlier this year, the ways in which I found myself communing with him more than ever, it's just still to me. I'm just, what is that? How did that? What? No one told me about this. Yeah.
Yeah. So when, you know, we have those experiences where, and this is back to your book, we did a previous episode on that. So anyone listening, if you haven't caught that one, Where'd You Park a Spaceship? Highly recommend it. For a fiction book, I'll say it's not, it's a slower read. Like I'd read it and I'd pause and I'd reflect, and yeah, there's a lot of layers to it. But where I was going with the question is, when we realize that we have been the one who's reliving this experience, like we're actually bitter. But I think when you're living it, you don't know. It's like, because you're numb. Like as you spoke about in the book, the main character is numb. He's been going from planet to planet, filing his report, doing this thing. Then he comes to this planet called Furtus, and is this place different? And I think, how many times in our life do we have this? Oh, is this different now? Or are we more aware of it? Like shifting from that cycle. The other thing that you didn't touch on, or I didn't pick up on the first read through, is as we start to shift out of that and realize, actually, I'm the problem, but I'm also the solution. What about the people around us who are still in the bitter place, navigating that?
Yeah. We set everybody around us free. We just set them free within us from having to be anything. So you think about unconditional love, which oftentimes is like, oh, you just love the person no matter what. But it also is meeting the world without conditions. They are who they are. Their story works for them. There's something about their suffering they enjoy. I don't know, whatever. You can just let them be where they're at. The ego loves if they would just be as advanced as I am. You know what I mean? It's in some senses we're at odds with them because we have a warped relationship with time. Like, why aren't they moving at the same speed I'm moving? Why aren't they as empowered as I am? Why aren't they? Well, they're not, first off. So I can pick a war with reality, but reality is they are who they are. They think how they think. They're telling the stories they're telling. So part of how we love ourselves is we meet them without conditions, and then, yeah, I don't feel like going over to their house. Okay. You don't have, like, you actually can have all sorts of, yeah, strength and engage how you want to and not engage. And
That makes me think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
So love is really, it's fascinating how the more actually love you have for the world as it currently is, not as you wish it was in your head, the more love you have, also what you'll discover is more spine, more boundaries in the most loving sense of, like, yeah, I might not go this time. Yeah, I know everybody's getting together. I'm only stay for an hour. And that's because of love. That's because of love.
Yeah. I was going to mention in your book, when he's the main character, for anyone who hasn't read it, comes across this character called Diltud in the beginning. He really annoys him. He's like, he speaks in word salad, he dresses ridiculously. Like, I'm paraphrasing, he doesn't say all this, but he's like, this person is so annoying. And then Dill doesn't change. He still speaks in word salad and dresses ridiculously, but he like warms to him. And when the assassin character turns up, he's like full on defensive. But and I think that, to your point, you keep being you and notice the ego frustration of they're not changing as fast as they are. I'm doing all this work and they're just the same. And it's like that doesn't annoy you so much when you shift out of it, or you even actually enjoy that. And to be able to say, I'm only coming for an hour, or not this time, and let them have their reaction, like, you don't care about me, or this or that or the other, because it's got nothing to do with you.
No, nothing to, yeah, right. And I love at one point when the character Nunye is like, this guy that you're defending, like, what does he do? And Keen's like, he hands stuff out. And she's like, oh my God, you're in so deep. You're like trying to protect this guy and you know nothing about him.
On the first read through, I must say, I paused for a minute. I was like, does this guy even exist, or is he a figment of his imagination? Like, And then I was like, no, hang on, because he introduced him to Nunye. Like, I remembered that soon on. Like, she had seen him early on, because I was like, at the beginning, I was like, as I said, the first read through, I was like, maybe he doesn't actually exist. Maybe he's, I don't know, having a breakdown, or is imagining somebody.
Right.
Because also when you don't see other people interact with them or talk about them, like no one else has mentioned him that I think of. None of the other characters, like
no one in the bakery. Right.
So it was like, does this person actually exist?
Oh, and I love how no one has pointed that out, but I love what that's a really great observation, because what Heen, in his sort of just doing the job numbness, he is absolutely annoyed by how Diltud has this familiarity, like they've been friends forever. Like, he talks to him just like they're picking up a conversation that they've been having for a while, but they haven't. But then the same thing makes him furious about how Nunye has this ability to connect with people. So when the two of them meet and just get on from the get-go, he's just like, God, these people who actually live for, it's almost like these people who live from their hearts and just connect, God, they're the worst. They're like, they just like find commonality between themselves, and they just love things, and they're passionate about trees and clothing and fabric. Like, it's almost like he's like, God, these humans who are alive, they're just insufferable.
Oh, that is so true. And but there are people you meet like that who, on reflection, you're like, oh wow, they're just like forever in the moment. Because like my son, Casimir, he wakes up every morning, he just loves life. It's
he's ready to go.
Amazing. And he's like, I wonder what I'm gonna get today, but not in a like grabby kind of expectation kind of thing.
Oh, I love
but
it.
Just and it's funny, wherever we go, that kid gets stuff. Like, I remember taking him to a florist, and he's wandering around, and the lady comes over and starts making him like a posy, like a little thing. And I'm like, oh, how much is this going to cost me, or whatever? And she just hands it to him. Like, he just walks out of a florist. And one time someone gave him a toothbrush. Like, it was bizarre. It was in a packet, brand new electric toothbrush. Here you go. It's Batman. I think you'll like that. And I'm just like, this doesn't happen, but it does.
It does, yeah. If you have a relative who complains about airline travel, that's the person whose flights get canceled
and loses their luggage.
I'm full on, yeah. So your kid wakes up with a generative view of the universe. It's good to be a human. It's good that we're here. It's good to be me. It's good to be you. Yeah. And this is not like a sort of warm, fuzzy, double woo, like, no. This the mind and what it projects into the world is shaping what the world even is. Absolutely.
And the way the response, like his alternative, I'd say, like, he's 100% him, and I've always encouraged that. And if someone says something like, I remember we were somewhere and he has his nails painted and he's, doing his thing, and someone's like, boys shouldn't have their nails painted. I think you're a bit extra or something. I can't remember. And he just looks them up and down and he's like, I think I look fabulous. I love that. I've like made a body memory of that moment, because I was like, how often do we, and you mentioned it in the book, I wrote some notes about, living the pattern forever, bending over backwards to impress, do they think I'm good enough or worthy enough to be here? And how many of us shape ourselves, to be like that? Whereas he's the kind of person who'll just walk in and is like, this is the way I am. And then if it's not accepted, I'll just walk out. Like, I don't have to stay here.
Yeah. What game? It's like his whole life is like, what game do you people think I'm playing? Wait. That's so great. Yeah.
But I loved you brought up the airline example, because I hadn't made the connection. I was that person who lost my luggage on every flight, and I spoke about it every time that I flew, and I like really ingrained that in. And when I stopped saying about how much my luggage got lost, my luggage stopped getting lost.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. But there's an expectation like, oh, my flight will be early, or I'll get an upgrade or something, but not in a way that you're trying to force it to conspire to happen. But like, I'd be open to a seat upgrade. Oh, wow, I got one.
Well, oh, wow, that really helps me understand. For a lot of people, any talk like that sounds like a sort of manipulative manifesting, where it's the response to a feeling of disempowered lack of control is an over control, where you can just dream it and it'll happen, baby.
Well, you're
As
doing the
opposed
same
to-
thing, but in the opposite. You're
Yes,
doing,
exactly. Yes, exactly. So it's dropping all of those stories. It's dropping the whole thing that's existing in the mind about control or lack of control, and being present to a particular kind of world.
Yeah. And it's the openness. I got a story. This will make you laugh. So Casimir and I were at the park, and he meets this other boy. Wherever he goes, he makes friends. And he wants me to ask the mum for her number. But I feel kind of weird. It's amazing how kids make friends like this. But as adults, it's like, anyway, so long story short, he kept asking me and I didn't. And so instead, we made a plan to meet there same time next week. I was like, edging my way into this friendship. And we get there same time next week and they're not there. And anyway, Casimir's like, oh, that's okay. I'll find him again. And I was like, okay. Anyway, a couple of months pass and I'm not in a lot of Facebook groups, like the mums ones. Long story short, a friend sends me a screenshot and goes, is this you? And this lady has written this story. And she's like, I don't want to be a creeper. And I laughed because I didn't want to ask for her number because I didn't want to be a creeper. So I was like, wow, we're on the same wavelength. If your son's named Casimir, the spelling was hilarious. She's like, we met in a park a couple of months ago. Anyway, long story short, we reconnected through Facebook. I joined this group so I could meet this lady. And I remember telling Casimir about it. And he's like, yeah, I manifested him. And he's like 7. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, my friend's a man and now we're friends again. So I manifested. Isn't that how it works?
I love it. You have quite a teacher right on your hands there.
I sure do. The way he sees the world and, the questions lurking in the midst of it. Yeah, 100%. But the curiosity or the non-attachment to it. And if it doesn't happen, he's not as fazed. Whereas I think, as you said, sometimes when people lean into the manifesting or the woo or whatever, they're trying to control as much as they're controlling when they're saying, oh, nothing ever works out for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And once again, the mind is all over the place. It's stuck in the past. It's way up in the future. It's just desperately grabbing and clinging to whatever it can get its hands on. And it makes us crazy.
I remember another guest I had on the show, Mark Silver, he called it a spiritual vending machine. I loved that. He's like, you can't just put it in, like I do these things and expect to get it like you would put coins or card now, I imagine, in a machine.
Right.
I love that. Well, thank you for joining me again, Rob. Just let the listeners know about your book, about your podcast, where they can find you.
The book is called Where'd You Park Your Spaceship? The podcast is called The Robcast, for visual art and events that I do here in California, all kinds of stuff. that's all at my site, robbell.com.
Yes. One of my friends is coming to one of your, where you sit under the tree. I can't remember what you call it. And
Love
she's
it.
like, oh my God, Rob Bell's coming to our show. I'm going to his. Oh, yeah.
Love it. Good.
Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.